The wind howled through the dusty streets of Belmont, Nevada, carrying whispers of scandal alongside the tumbleweeds that scattered across the parched earth. Florence Wilson stood on the creaking wooden porch of her newly inherited property, her reputation preceding her like an unwelcome shadow, the woman who had buried 5 husbands and still had the audacity to wear white lace on her wedding days. It was September 1876, and Florence had just arrived in Belmont after the passing of her 5th husband, a silver miner who'd left her his modest claim and the small cabin at the edge of town. At 32, her beauty remained undimmed honey-blonde hair swept into a practical bun, intelligent green eyes that missed nothing, and a stubborn set to her chin that belied her delicate features. "You the Wilson widow," a gruff voice called out. Florence turned to find a weathered man with a gray, streaked beard eyeing her suspiciously from the dusty road. "I'm Florence Wilson, yes," she replied, her voice steady despite the familiar discomfort of being assessed like a suspicious package. "Heard you've buried more men than the undertaker," the man said with a snort, continuing his way without waiting for her response. Florence squared her shoulders, having long since grown accustomed to the whispers that followed her. 5 husbands dead, the first from influenza just months after their wedding, the second in a mining collapse, the third from a gunshot wound during a saloon brawl he hadn't even been part of, the fourth thrown from a horse, and the 5th, most recently, succumbing to pneumonia after falling through river ice. The rumors of a curse had begun after the 3rd, but by the 5th, even Florence sometimes wondered if some malevolent force followed her. She turned back to her new home, a small but solid cabin built of local pine, its windows cloudy with dirt and neglect. This would be a fresh start. No more men, no more heartbreak, no more whispers of the Black Widow of the West. She would work her husband's claim, live quietly, and finally find peace. 3 days later, Florence had scrubbed the cabin to respectable cleanliness and ventured into town for supplies. Belmont was experiencing a silver boom, and the main street buzzed with prospectors, gamblers, and merchants all looking to capitalize on the latest rush. She kept her eyes down as she entered the general store, the bell above the door announcing her arrival and causing several heads to turn in her direction. Mrs. Wilson, the shopkeeper, an older man named Mr. Hobson, acknowledged her with a polite but guarded nod. "What can I help you with today?" Florence produced her list. "Just the essentials, Mr. Hobson. Some flour, coffee, sugar, and perhaps some fabric if you have it. I'm in need of new curtains." As Mr. Hobson gathered her items, the store door swung open again, bringing with it a gust of wind and dust, and a tall man who seemed to fill the small space with his presence. Florence glanced up, then quickly away, but not before taking in the sight of him, broad-shouldered, lean-hipped, with a shock of dark hair and eyes the color of a summer storm. "Afternoon, Hobson," the man said, removing his hat to reveal a tanned face with a strong jawline softened by the hint of a smile. "Got that order from Carson City in yet? Just yesterday, Mr. Jenkins. Been expecting you." Mr. Hobson gestured toward the back room. "Let me finish with Mrs. Wilson here, and I'll get it for you." The man Jenkins turned his attention to Florence, his eyes assessing but not unkind. "Madam," he said with a slight nod. Florence nodded back, her fingers tightening around her reticule. The last thing she needed was to draw attention to herself, especially from a man who looked capable of stirring a woman's interest. "You must be the new arrival," he continued, apparently unaware of her desire to remain unnoticed. "I'm Adam Jenkins. I run the Lucky Strike Ranch about 5 miles east of town." "Florence Wilson," she replied, her voice cooler than she intended. "And yes, I've recently arrived to take over my late husband's property." Something flickered in Adam's eyes, recognition, perhaps, or wariness. "My condolences for your loss, Mrs. Wilson." Before she could respond, the store's back door opened, and a young woman with auburn hair hurried in, her cheeks flushed. "Mr. Jenkins, Pa said to remind you about the fencing supplies." Adam turned to the girl with an easy smile. "Thanks, Sadie. I hadn't forgotten." Florence took the opportunity to pay for her purchases and make her exit. As she stepped onto the boardwalk, she heard Adam Jenkins' voice behind her. "Mrs. Wilson," he called, causing her to pause and turn back. He stood in the doorway, his hat back on his head but tilted up to reveal those stormy eyes. "If you need any help out at your place, the Lucky Strike hands and I are just a ride away." Florence forced a polite smile. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins, but I'm quite capable of managing on my own." Something like amusement crossed his features. "I don't doubt that for a minute, madam. Just being neighborly." With a nod that she hoped conveyed both gratitude and dismissal, Florence continued down the street toward the livery where she'd left her wagon. She could feel his gaze on her back, but refused to give him the satisfaction of looking over her shoulder. 2 weeks later, Florence was beginning to question her confidence about managing on her own. The roof of her cabin leaked in 3 places. Her attempt to repair the corral fence had resulted in a painful splinter that had become infected. And the mine claim that her husband had supposedly left her appeared to be playing out, with barely enough silver to justify the backbreaking work. She sat on her porch step, staring out at the sunset painting the Nevada mountains in shades of gold and crimson, her infected hand throbbing despite the poultice she'd applied. For the first time since arriving in Belmont, she allowed herself a moment of pure self-pity. The sound of approaching hoofbeats snapped her out of her reverie. Florence squinted against the setting sun, making out the silhouette of a rider approaching at a steady pace. As he drew closer, she recognized the broad shoulders and easy seat of Adam Jenkins. Quickly, she tried to compose herself, pushing back stray hairs that had escaped her bun and surreptitiously wiping away the tears that had threatened to fall. "Evening, Mrs. Wilson," Adam called as he reined in his horse, a magnificent chestnut gelding that nickered softly. "Hope I'm not intruding, Mr. Jenkins," Florence acknowledged, rising to her feet. "This is a surprise." Adam dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. "Rode by your mine claim earlier today. Noticed your work there." His eyes held no judgment, but Florence felt defensive nonetheless. "I'm learning as I go," she said stiffly. "That's a hard way to learn mining," he replied, his gaze drifting to her bandaged hand. "You're hurt." Florence instinctively tucked her hand behind her skirt. "It's nothing serious." Adam's expression suggested he didn't believe her, but he didn't press. Instead, he glanced up at her roof, where patches of new shingles stood out against the weathered ones. "Roof giving you trouble?" he asked. "Nothing I can't handle," Florence insisted, even as a drop of water from the previous night's rain fell from the eaves to land with perfect accuracy on the top of her head. To his credit, Adam didn't laugh, though the corners of his mouth twitched. "Mrs. Wilson, I don't mean to overstep, but I have a proposition for you." Florence stiffened. "Mr. Jenkins," he held up a hand. "A business proposition," he clarified. "Your mining claim borders my grazing land. The water from your stream feeds into my creek, which waters my cattle." "I'm aware of the geography, Mr. Jenkins," Florence said. "What you might not be aware of is that your claim isn't going to yield much more silver. Your late husband, begging your pardon, wasn't much of a miner." Florence's cheeks flushed with anger. "How dare you?" "But," Adam continued undeterred, "that land has value to me, and I have men who can fix your roof properly and see to that hand of yours before you lose it to blood poisoning." Florence fell silent, looking down at her throbbing hand, then back up at Adam. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Jenkins? Let me help you get this place in order. In exchange, I'd like to discuss purchasing your mining claim. Fair price, of course." Florence considered him for a long moment. Everything about the man suggested reliability, from his steady gaze to his well-maintained clothing and equipment. But she thought the same about each of her husbands, and where had that left her? "Why would you want a played-out silver claim?" she asked suspiciously. "Water rights," he answered simply. "And a bit more grazing land for my herd. I've been expanding." It made sense, but Florence was still wary. "And if I decline your offer of help but am still willing to discuss selling the claim?" Adam shrugged. "Then we'll talk business once you've recovered from that infection that's working its way up your arm." Florence glanced down at her hand again, noticing for the first time the angry red streaks extending from beneath the bandage. "I'll send Doc Miller out to look at that," Adam said, already mounting his horse. "And my foreman and a couple of hands will be by tomorrow to fix your roof. No strings, Mrs. Wilson, just being neighborly." Before Florence could protest, he tipped his hat and urged his horse into a trot, disappearing down the road as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky. True to his word, Dr. Miller arrived within the hour, tending to Florence's hand with a mixture of gentle care and stern admonishment about proper wound care. The following morning, Adam's foreman, a taciturn man named Hank, arrived with 2 ranch hands, and by sundown, her roof no longer leaked, her corral fence was properly mended, and a stack of firewood had appeared beside her door. Florence found herself both grateful and unsettled by the efficient help. When Adam himself appeared 3 days later to inquire after her health, she had no choice but to invite him in for coffee. "Your men did excellent work," she admitted as she poured the steaming liquid into her best cups, wedding gifts from her 3rd marriage that had somehow survived her various relocations. "They're good men," Adam agreed, accepting the coffee with a nod of thanks. He looked around her small cabin with interest, taking in the neat organization and the few personal touches she'd added: a quilt on the bed, a small shelf of books, a vase of wildflowers on the table. "You've made this place quite comfortable," he observed. Florence sat across from him, cradling her own cup. Her hand, while still bandaged, was healing well thanks to Dr. Miller's care. "I've had practice making new places feel like home." Adam's eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. "Yes, I've heard you've moved around quite a bit." Florence tensed. Here it came the inevitable reference to her past, the dead husbands, the rumors of curses and bad luck. "Mr. Jenkins, if I've come to offer you a fair price for your mining claim," he interrupted, setting his cup down. $1,500. Florence nearly choked on her coffee. The sum was more than generous for a claim that was barely producing. "That's considerably more than it's worth," she said cautiously. Adam leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Maybe to a miner. To a rancher looking to secure water rights and expand his grazing land, it's a fair price." Florence studied him, trying to discern his true motives. "And if I accept, what then? Do I pack up and move on to the next town, continuing my reputation?" Adam's gaze didn't waver. "That would be entirely up to you, Mrs. Wilson, though I will say Belmont could use someone with your determination. The hotel in town is looking for a manager. Owner's getting too old to handle it himself." Florence set her cup down with a soft clink. "You've given this quite a bit of thought." "I'm a man who plans ahead," Adam replied with a slight smile. "And I pay attention to people who interest me." The implication hung in the air between them, causing a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee to spread through Florence's chest. She quickly tamped it down. 5 times she'd allowed herself to hope, to dream of a future with a man by her side. 5 times she'd watched those dreams crumble to dust. "I'll consider your offer for the claim," she said finally, rising to indicate that their meeting was over. "And I appreciate the information about the hotel." Adam stood as well, towering over her in the small cabin but somehow not making her feel crowded. "I'll draw up the papers and bring them by in a few days. Take your time deciding." As he reached for his hat, his eyes caught on a small daguerreotype on her shelf, the only image of her 5 husbands she displayed, a group portrait taken at a county fair with her 4th husband, the only time any of them had been photographed together. "Your family?" he asked. Florence hesitated, then nodded. "My late husbands, the first 4 at least." Adam studied the image for a moment, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "You've endured more loss than most, Mrs. Wilson." "Yes," she said simply, unwilling to elaborate or defend herself. To her surprise, Adam didn't press for details. He merely settled his hat on his head and moved toward the door. "I'll be back with those papers. In the meantime, keep that hand clean and consider talking to Mr. Garrison at the hotel. No harm in exploring options." After he left, Florence stood at the window watching his retreating figure, her thoughts in turmoil. Adam Jenkins was unlike any man she'd encountered before, direct without being crude, helpful without expecting immediate return, and most unsettling of all, apparently undeterred by her history. It took Florence less than a week to decide that selling her claim was the sensible choice. The infection in her hand had set her back on mining work, and truth be told, she had little passion for the backbreaking labor. When Adam returned with the papers, she signed them without haggling over the price, surprising both of them. "You're sure?" he asked as she handed the papers back. "I was prepared for a bit more negotiation." Florence managed a small smile. "I know when to cut my losses, Mr. Jenkins. Besides, your offer is more than fair." Adam counted out the money, crisp bills and several gold eagles, and pushed it across her table. "You've made a wise decision, Mrs. Wilson." "I've made a necessary one," she corrected him, but without bitterness. The weight of the failing mine lifted from her shoulders, replaced by the unfamiliar lightness of possibility. True to her practical nature, Florence visited the Belmont Hotel the very next day. Mr. Garrison, a stooped man with rheumy eyes and arthritic hands, was openly skeptical about hiring her until she demonstrated her accounting skills and organizational abilities, honed through years of managing households, and in one case, a small mercantile in Colorado. "You'll have to live on the premises," Mr. Garrison warned her. "Rooms small off the kitchen. Previous manager complained about the noise from the saloon next door." "I've slept through stampedes and mining explosions, Mr. Garrison," Florence assured him. "A little saloon music won't trouble me." By the end of September, Florence had sold her cabin to a newly arrived miner, moved into the small but clean room at the hotel, and settled into her role as manager with unexpected satisfaction. The hotel, while modest, served as Belmont's social hub, hosting everything from mining company meetings to ladies' aid society gatherings. Florence threw herself into her work, slowly earning the respect of the townspeople through her efficiency and unfailing politeness. The whispers about her past didn't disappear entirely, but they diminished in the face of her present usefulness to the community. Adam Jenkins became a regular visitor to the hotel, taking his midday meal there whenever he was in town on business. He always requested a table in Florence's section. She often helped serve when they were short-staffed, and their conversations, while brief, gradually evolved from polite exchanges to genuine discussions about books they'd read, places they'd been, and the latest town gossip. One crisp October afternoon, Adam lingered over his coffee longer than usual, watching Florence efficiently manage a sudden influx of passengers from the stage. "You seem to have found your place here," he observed when she finally had a moment to refill his cup. Florence glanced around the bustling dining room with a small smile. "It suits me for now. Just for now." Adam raised an eyebrow. "Already planning your next move, Mrs. Wilson?" There was something in his tone, a lightness that might have been teasing, or perhaps a genuine question that made Florence pause. "I've learned not to plan too far ahead, Mr. Jenkins," she said finally. "Life has a way of rearranging expectations." Adam nodded, his expression turning thoughtful. "That it does. Speaking of which, there's a harvest dance at the Grange Hall next Saturday. Would you consider attending with me?" The question caught Florence completely off guard. She stared at him, searching for signs that he was joking or that there was some ulterior motive behind the invitation. As your companion," she clarified, her voice betraying more surprise than she intended. "As my date, Mrs. Wilson," Adam replied, holding her gaze steadily. "I enjoy your company, and I'd like to enjoy it in a setting where you're not obligated to refill my coffee cup." Florence felt heat rising in her cheeks. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm not sure that would be wise. People talk, and my reputation is your concern, not mine," Adam interrupted gently. "I make up my own mind about people, Florence." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Besides," he continued with a hint of a smile, "I'm quite capable of handling a few whispers and sidelong glances. The question is, are you willing to risk being seen with a man who's known for his stubborn persistence and questionable taste in hats?" The unexpected humor broke through Florence's reserve, drawing a genuine laugh from her. "Your hat is perfectly respectable, Mr. Jenkins." "Adam," he corrected her. "And you still haven't answered my question about the dance." Florence hesitated, balanced on the knife edge of caution and desire. 5 times she had given her heart, and 5 times she had lost not only love but the future she had envisioned. The sensible choice would be to decline politely, to maintain the comfortable distance of friendly acquaintances. But something in Adam's steady gaze, in the patient way he waited for her answer, made her take the leap. "Yes," she said, surprised by the firmness in her voice. "I would be pleased to accompany you, Adam." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, warm, and full of promise. "I'll call for you at 7 then." As he stood to leave, placing coins on the table to cover his meal and a generous tip, he paused. "And Florence, wear something that matches those remarkable eyes of yours. Green becomes you." With that, he was gone, leaving Florence standing beside the table, coffee pot still in hand, wondering what she had just set in motion. The night of the harvest dance arrived with a briskness in the air that hinted at the approaching winter. Florence stood before the small mirror in her room, assessing her appearance with critical eyes. The dress she wore, emerald green silk with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs, was one of the few fine things she had kept from her previous life. It had been a gift from her 5th husband, and though she had considered selling it during leaner times, something had always stopped her. Now, as she smoothed the fabric over her hips, she was glad she had kept it. The color did indeed bring out the green in her eyes, making them appear more vivid against her fair skin and honey blonde hair, which she had arranged in a more elaborate style than her usual practical bun. A knock at her door announced Adam's arrival. Florence took a deep breath, fighting back a sudden attack of nerves. It had been years since she had attended a social function as anything other than a wife or a widow. To go as simply Florence, on the arm of a man who had made his interest clear. It felt both exhilarating and terrifying. She opened the door to find Adam standing there in his Sunday best, a dark suit, crisp white shirt, and string tie. He had tamed his usually windswept hair, and his face was freshly shaved, the scent of bay rum lingering about him. "Florence," he said, his eyes taking in her appearance with undisguised appreciation. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy under his admiring gaze. "You clean up quite well yourself, Mr. Jenkins." "Adam," he reminded her with a smile, offering his arm. "Shall we?" The Grange Hall was transformed for the occasion, festooned with autumn leaves, dried corn husks, and paper lanterns that cast a warm glow over the proceedings. A small band played in the corner, and tables laden with food and drink lined one wall. Nearly everyone in Belmont and the surrounding ranches had turned out, creating a lively atmosphere thick with conversation and laughter. As Florence and Adam entered, she felt the immediate ripple of attention, the momentary lull in conversations, the turning of heads. Adam, seemingly oblivious or deliberately ignoring the reaction, guided her through the crowd with a hand lightly at the small of her back, stopping to exchange greetings with acquaintances along the way. "Mr. Jenkins." A plump, matronly woman intercepted them, her curious gaze darting between Adam and Florence. "How lovely to see you at a social gathering for once. And Mrs. Wilson, isn't it? I'm Mrs. Prentice, president of the Ladies' Aid Society." "A pleasure, Mrs. Prentice," Florence responded with a polite smile, recognizing the woman as one of the hotel's regular lunch patrons and one of the most prolific gossips in Belmont. "Mrs. Wilson has been doing an excellent job managing the hotel," Adam said, his hand still warm against Florence's back. "Mr. Garrison tells me business has improved 30% since she took over." Mrs. Prentice's eyebrows rose. "Is that so? How?" "Industrious of you, Mrs. Wilson." "Florence has a talent for bringing order to chaos," Adam continued, his tone casual but his words deliberately chosen. "Belmont is fortunate to have her." The message was clear. Adam Jenkins, one of the most respected ranchers in the area, was publicly declaring his support and admiration for Florence Wilson, five-time widow and subject of whispered speculation. Mrs. Prentice, sensing the shift in dynamics, quickly adjusted her approach. "Well, we're always looking for new members in the Ladies' Aid, Mrs. Wilson. Perhaps you'd consider joining us for our Wednesday meetings. We're currently organizing the Christmas charity baskets." "I'd be delighted," Florence replied, genuinely surprised by the invitation. It was the first overture of social inclusion she had received since arriving in Belmont. As Mrs. Prentice moved on, Florence glanced up at Adam. "That was kind of you." "It wasn't kindness, it was truth," he replied. "Now, would you care to dance, or would you prefer some punch first?" "Punch, I think," Florence said, suddenly aware of how dry her mouth had become. "And then perhaps a dance if the offer still stands." Adam's eyes crinkled at the corners. "The offer stands for as long as you'll have me, Florence Wilson." The evening progressed like a dream, alternating between spirited dances that left Florence flushed and breathless, and quieter moments of conversation at the edge of the dance floor. Adam introduced her to ranch owners, merchants, and miners, always with the same easy confidence that suggested there was nothing unusual about his choice of companion. During a particularly lively Virginia reel, Florence found herself partnered briefly with Mr. Hobson from the general store. "Never seen Jenkins quite so attentive to a lady before," Hobson remarked as they circled each other. "Man's been a confirmed bachelor since he came to these parts 10 years ago." Before Florence could respond, the dance moved her on to the next partner. But Hobson's words stayed with her, adding another layer to her growing perception of Adam Jenkins as a man, unlike any she had known before. As the evening wore on, Adam guided her outside onto the porch of the Grange Hall, where the cool night air provided a welcome respite from the warmth inside. Stars glittered above them in the clear Nevada sky, and the distant howl of a coyote reminded them of the wilderness that surrounded their small pocket of civilization. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Adam asked, leaning against the porch railing beside her. Florence nodded, drawing her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the chill. "More than I expected to. It's been a long time since I attended a dance for pleasure rather than obligation." Adam studied her profile in the faint light spilling from the hall windows. "Were none of your marriages happy, Florence?" The question, asked without judgment, still caused a momentary tightening in her chest. "They each began with hope," she said finally. "But the first was too brief for true happiness to take root. The others, each had their moments. But looking back, I think I was more in love with the idea of stability, of belonging somewhere, than I was with any of the men themselves." She glanced at him, half expecting to see disapproval, but found only attentive interest. "And you?" she asked, turning the tables. "Mr. Hobson says you've been a confirmed bachelor for a decade. No one has captured your interest before now." Adam's mouth quirked into a half-smile. "I've been busy building the lucky strike into something that will last, and perhaps I've been waiting for someone worth changing my habits for." The implication hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Florence felt her heart beating faster, both thrilled and terrified by the direction their conversation was taking. "Adam, I should be honest with you," she said, her voice low and serious. "People call me the Black Widow for a reason. 5 husbands, all dead within 3 years of marriage. Some say I'm cursed. Others imply worse." Adam straightened, turning to face her fully. "Do you believe you're cursed, Florence?" She hesitated, having never been asked the question so directly. "I don't know. I've certainly had more than my share of tragedy. After the 3rd husband died, I began to wonder if there was something about me that attracts misfortune. Or perhaps you've simply had extraordinarily bad luck," Adam suggested, his voice gentle. "Mining accidents, illness, a stray bullet, these are the risks of life out here. Many women have lost husbands to similar fates." "Not 5, Florence countered, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. "No," Adam conceded. "Not 5, but that doesn't make you cursed, Florence. It makes you a survivor." He reached out slowly, as if giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. His palm was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked alongside his men despite owning the ranch. "I'm not a superstitious man," he continued, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "I believe we make our own luck, good and bad, and I'm willing to take my chances if you are." Florence looked up at him, this man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly, and was now offering something she had thought permanently beyond her reach, a 6th chance at happiness. "I don't want anyone else to die because of me," she whispered, giving voice to her deepest fear. Adam's grip on her hand tightened slightly. "I have no intention of dying anytime soon, Florence Wilson. I'm too stubborn for that." Before she could respond, the band inside struck up a waltz, the melody drifting out to where they stood. "Dance with me," Adam said, the request somewhere between a question and a command. There on the porch, under the vast Nevada sky, Florence stepped into Adam's arms. They moved together to the distant music, finding their rhythm as naturally as if they had danced together for years. Florence felt something loosen inside her chest, some knot of grief and fear that had been pulled tight for so long she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe freely. As the music ended, Adam didn't release her immediately. Instead, he gazed down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Florence," he said softly. "I'd like to court you properly. No rushing, no pressure. Just two people getting to know each other and seeing where it leads. Would you allow me that?" Florence thought of all the reasons to say no, her history, the whispers that would follow them, the risk of opening her heart again only to have it shattered. But looking up into Adam's steady gray eyes, she found herself nodding. "Yes," she said simply. "I would like that very much." The weeks that followed were unlike any courtship Florence had experienced before. Adam was methodical in his approach, calling on her regularly but respectfully, bringing small gifts that showed his attentiveness, a book of poetry she had mentioned enjoying, a small potted plant for her windowsill at the hotel, fresh eggs from his ranch chickens. They rode together on Sundays, exploring the hills around Belmont, Adam pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of his early days in Nevada. They attended church services, took their meals together when his business brought him to town, and gradually, Florence found herself looking forward to his visits with an eagerness that both delighted and frightened her. True to his word, Adam never rushed her, never pressed for more intimacy than she was ready to give. Their first kiss came nearly a month into their courtship, on a crisp November afternoon as they walked back from a picnic in a sheltered valley where late wildflowers still bloomed despite the approaching winter. "You're smiling more," Adam observed, helping her over a fallen log. "It suits you." Florence felt the now familiar warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I have reasons to smile these days." Adam's hand lingered on hers, his expression growing serious. "Florence, may I kiss you?" The directness of the question surprised her. Her previous husbands had either taken such liberties without asking or had been too hesitant to make the first move. Adam's approach, respectful but not timid, was refreshingly different. "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Adam stepped closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. His eyes held hers as he lowered his head, giving her every chance to change her mind. But Florence had no desire to retreat. Instead, she rose slightly on her toes to meet him halfway. The kiss was soft at first, a gentle press of lips that nonetheless sent currents of warmth through her entire body. When Adam drew back slightly, Florence surprised herself by following, her hands coming up to rest on his chest as she sought his mouth again. The second kiss deepened, Adam's arm encircling her waist to draw her closer as Florence's fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. When they finally parted, both were breathing faster, and Florence felt a blush rising in her cheeks. "I've been wanting to do that since the harvest dance," Adam admitted, his voice rougher than usual. Florence smiled up at him, feeling younger and lighter than she had in years. "Why did you wait so long?" Adam tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch lingering. "Because some things are worth waiting for, Florence Wilson. And I wanted to be sure you were ready." As winter settled over Belmont, bringing snow to the mountains and quiet to the town as mining operations slowed, Florence and Adam's courtship continued to flourish. They spent Christmas Eve at the Lucky Strike, where Florence met Adam's foreman and ranch hands in a more social setting, sharing a festive meal in the comfortable main house that Adam had built with his own hands. The ranch impressed her not for its size, though it was substantial, but for the evident care and thought that had gone into its development. Everything from the location of the buildings to the management of the herds reflected Adam's methodical, forward-thinking approach. "You've built something remarkable here," Florence told him as they stood on the porch after dinner, watching the snow fall gently in the lantern light. "You should be proud." Adam's arm around her shoulders tightened slightly. "I am, but lately I've been thinking it's missing something important." "Oh, what's that?" Florence asked, turning to face him. Adam's expression was soft but serious. "A partner, someone to share it with, to build a future with. Florence's heart began to beat faster. Adam, I'm not proposing, not yet, he clarified quickly. But I want you to know that's where my thoughts are heading, Florence. I'm falling in love with you, and when the time is right, I intend to ask you to be my wife. Florence felt tears pricking at her eyes, emotions too complex to name welling up within her. Even knowing my history, the rumors, the possibility that whatever ill fortune follows me might touch you too. Adam took her hands in his gaze steady and certain. I told you before, I make up my own mind. And my mind is made up about you, Florence Wilson. Whatever the future holds, I want to face it with you beside me. He brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. But I understand your hesitation, so I won't ask until you're ready to say yes, even if that takes months or years. I'm a patient man. Florence leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. I'm afraid, she admitted in a whisper. Not of loving you, I think it's too late to prevent that, but of what might happen if I let myself hope again. Adam pulled her gently into his arms, resting his chin on the top of her head. Then we'll take it one day at a time. No pressure, no rush, just us finding our way together. As winter gave way to spring, Florence found herself settling into a happiness she had nearly convinced herself was beyond her reach. Her position at the hotel provided stability and purpose, while her relationship with Adam deepened with each passing week. Even the town's attitude toward her had shifted, the whispers largely replaced by grudging acceptance and, from some quarters, genuine warmth. Then, on a mild April evening as Florence was balancing the hotel's monthly accounts, a breathless young boy burst into the lobby. Mrs. Wilson. There's been an accident at the Lucky Strike. Mr. Jenkins was thrown from his horse trying to head off a stampede. Florence's world tilted sideways, the ledger book slipping from her suddenly numb fingers. Is he? She couldn't bring herself to finish the question. He's alive, madam, the boy assured her quickly. But Doc Miller says it's bad. They're bringing him to town now. The next hours passed in a blur of fear and desperate prayer. Adam, unconscious and alarmingly pale, was carried into the hotel's best room, where Dr. Miller examined him with grave concentration. Concussion, 3 broken ribs and a dislocated shoulder, the doctor reported finally. He was lucky the horse didn't roll over him completely. He'll need careful watching for the next 48 hours. If he wakes and remains lucid, his chances are good. Florence nodded, fighting to maintain her composure. I'll stay with him. Dr. Miller eyed her with a mixture of compassion and concern. Mrs. Wilson, perhaps given your history. Someone else might. I'm staying, Florence interrupted, her voice leaving no room for argument. He would do the same for me. And stay she did, through 2 days and nights of anxious vigilance, leaving Adam's side only when absolutely necessary and then only briefly. She bathed his face with cool cloths when fever threatened, administered the laudanum Dr. Miller prescribed for pain, and spoke to him constantly, whether he could hear her or not. You are not allowed to die, Adam Jenkins, she told him during the darkest hours of the second night, when his breathing had grown labored and her fear had reached its peak. Do you hear me? You promised me 6 times forever, and I'm holding you to that, even if you haven't actually proposed yet. As if in response, Adam's eyelids fluttered and then opened, his gray eyes cloudy with pain but unmistakably aware. Florence, he rasped, his voice barely audible. I'm here, she said, grasping his hand tightly. Lie still, you've been hurt. Adam's fingers weakly returned her pressure. Heard you, not dying, too stubborn, remember. Relief washed over Florence in a wave so powerful it left her light-headed. Yes, you are absolutely too stubborn. Thank God for it. A ghost of a smile touched Adam's lips before his eyes closed again. this time in natural sleep rather than unconsciousness. By the end of the week, Adam had improved enough to be moved back to the Lucky Strike, where he could continue his recovery in more comfortable surroundings. Florence, to the surprise of many but the approval of Dr. Miller, took a leave of absence from the hotel to accompany him, installing herself in a guest room and assuming the role of nurse with the same efficiency she brought to all her endeavors. "You don't have to do this," Adam protested weakly as she helped him settle into his own bed. "I have ranch hands who can look after me." "Ranch hands who wouldn't know a proper poultice from a cow patty," Florence retorted, plumping his pillows with perhaps more force than necessary. "Besides, I want to be here, unless you'd prefer I leave." Adam caught her hand, his grip stronger than it had been in the hospital room but still far from his usual vigor. "No, I want you here more than anything. I just don't want you to feel obligated." Florence sat on the edge of the bed, allowing herself to stroke the dark hair back from his forehead in a gesture of tenderness she rarely permitted herself. "It's not obligation, Adam. It's love." It was the first time she had spoken the word aloud, and seeing the joy that spread across Adam's face despite his pain made her wonder why she had waited so long. "Say it again," he requested, his eyes never leaving hers. "I love you," Florence repeated, her voice stronger this time. "And it terrifies me because everyone I've ever loved has been taken from me. When they told me you were hurt, I thought, but I didn't die," Adam interrupted gently. "I'm right here, Florence. Still stubborn, still in love with you, and still intending to make you my wife when I can get down on one knee properly." Florence let out a watery laugh. "I'd settle for you being able to sit up without wincing." Adam's recovery was slow but steady. By early June, he was able to resume light duties around the ranch, though Florence insisted on accompanying him on his rounds, watchful for any sign of fatigue or pain. Their time together at the Lucky Strike had shifted something in their relationship, deepening their understanding of each other and cementing a partnership that went beyond romance. Florence had sent word to Mr. Garrison that she would not be returning to the hotel, a decision made easier by Adam's proposal delivered not on bended knee as he had planned, but on a quiet evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. "Marry me, Florence," he had said simply, pressing a small velvet box into her hand. "Be my partner in everything this ranch our lives, whatever future we create together." Inside the box was a ring unlike any she had worn before, a Montana sapphire the color of a summer sky, set in gold with small diamonds on either side. "It's not a diamond," Adam had explained, watching her face carefully. "I thought you might prefer something different. Something that isn't a reminder." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, his understanding that a traditional diamond might evoke memories of her previous marriages, had brought tears to Florence's eyes. "It's perfect," she had told him, and meant it. "And yes, Adam Jenkins, I will marry you." Now, as June blossomed into July and Adam's strength returned fully, they began planning their wedding, a simple ceremony to be held in August, with only close friends in attendance. "Nothing elaborate," Florence insisted. "No white dress, no fuss." "Whatever you want," Adam agreed, though she caught a flicker of something like disappointment in his eyes. "What is it?" she pressed. "Tell me what you're thinking." Adam shrugged, trying for nonchalance. "I just thought, this is the first and only time I'll be getting married. I wouldn't mind celebrating that properly." Florence's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. Of course, for all his understanding and acceptance of her past, this was Adam's first marriage. He deserved to have it marked in a way that honored the significance of the occasion. "What did you have in mind?" she asked softly. "Nothing extravagant," he assured her quickly, But maybe not just a quick ceremony at the justice of the peace either. Perhaps the church, some flowers, a dinner after, and, Florence prompted when he hesitated. And I'd like to see you in a special dress, Adam admitted. Not white if that bothers you, but something that makes you feel as beautiful as I see you. Florence considered his words, touched by the sentiment behind them. Blue, she said finally. I'll have a blue dress made to match my ring. And we'll have the ceremony in the church, with flowers and music and a proper dinner after. The smile that lit up Adam's face was all the confirmation she needed that she had made the right decision. As their wedding day approached, Florence found herself experiencing something she had thought long buried beneath layers of grief and caution, genuine excitement. With the help of Mrs. Prentice and other ladies from the Aid Society, she planned a celebration that balanced Adam's desire for a proper wedding with her own preference for simplicity. The blue dress, crafted by Belmont's skilled seamstress from silk ordered specially from San Francisco, was elegant without being ostentatious. The church would be decorated with wildflowers from the hills around the Lucky Strike. The dinner, to be held at the hotel, would feature the best food Mr. Garrison's cook could prepare. Everything was proceeding smoothly until 3 days before the wedding, when Florence returned from a final fitting of her dress to find Adam on the porch of the main house, his expression grave as he read a telegram. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately sensing his distress. Adam looked up, folding the paper and tucking it into his pocket. "Nothing for you to worry about, just some business in Carson City that needs attention." But Florence knew him too well now to be fooled by his casual tone. "Adam, tell me." He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she had come to recognize as a sign of inner conflict. "It's Harlan Walker. He's been released from prison and he's been making threats." Florence frowned, the name unfamiliar. "Who is Harlan Walker?" Adam hesitated, then gestured for her to sit beside him on the porch swing. "Before I came to Nevada, I was a deputy marshal in Arizona. Walker was an outlaw I helped bring in after a stage robbery that left 2 people dead. He swore he'd kill me when he got out." Florence felt a chill that had nothing to do with the warm summer air. "And now he's free, 3 days before our wedding." "The timing's just coincidence," Adam assured her, taking her hand. "And the telegram is just a courtesy warning from a friend who still has connections in law enforcement. Walker was last seen headed toward Utah. There's no reason to think he even knows where I am now." Florence wanted to believe him, but years of experience with tragedy had taught her that coincidences were rarely benign. "Perhaps we should postpone the wedding," she suggested, hating the words even as she spoke them. "Just until we're sure he's not a threat." Adam's expression hardened slightly. "I'm not letting some 2-bit outlaw dictate when I marry the woman I love. We've waited long enough, Florence." The wedding happens as planned. His determination should have reassured her, but Florence found herself unable to shake the sense of foreboding that had settled over her. That night, for the first time since agreeing to marry Adam, she dreamed of her dead husbands, all 5 of them standing in a row, their faces blurred but their stance accusing, as if she had somehow betrayed them by finding happiness again. She woke gasping, sweat dampening her nightgown despite the cool night air. Slipping from bed, she moved to the window of her guest room, staring out at the moonlit landscape of the ranch, the place that was to become her home in just a few days. In the silver light, the familiar shapes of barns and corrals seemed suddenly alien and threatening. "It's just nerves," she told herself firmly. "Just wedding nerves, nothing more." But the next day brought another telegram, this one from the sheriff in a town just 50 miles east of Belmont. Harlan Walker, seen here asking questions about Jenkins' stop proceed, with caution stop. Adam's face darkened as he read the message, but his voice remained steady as he issued orders to his ranch hands. Double the watches, especially at night. No one rides alone, not even to check the herds, and I want a man stationed in town, keeping an eye on Florence's hotel room. I'm not going back to the hotel, Florence protested. My place is here with you. Your place is wherever you'll be safest, Adam countered, his tone brooking no argument. And right now, that's in town, surrounded by people, not out here where Walker could easily slip onto the property. Their first real argument as an engaged couple was brief but intense. In the end, Florence reluctantly agreed to return to town, but only after extracting a promise from Adam that he would not confront Walker alone if the outlaw appeared. I've handled men like him before, Adam assured her as he helped her into the wagon that would take her back to Belmont. And I have too much to live for now to take foolish risks. Florence clung to those words over the next 24 hours as she moved mechanically through final wedding preparations, her mind constantly returning to Adam alone at the ranch, despite his assurances that his men were vigilant. The eve of their wedding arrived, bringing with it a sense of unreality. Florence sat in her old room at the hotel, the blue wedding dress hanging from the wardrobe door, her packed trunk ready for the journey back to the Lucky Strike the following day as Mrs. Adam Jenkins. Everything was arranged, every detail attended to. Yet the shadow of Harlan Walker hung over what should have been a night of happy anticipation. A knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. Cautiously, she approached, calling out, "Who is it?" "It's me," came Adam's familiar voice. "Open up, Florence." Relief flooded through her as she unbolted the door, but it quickly turned to alarm at the sight of him travel-worn, his face grim. "What's happened?" she demanded, pulling him inside and quickly closing the door. "Walker showed up at the ranch this afternoon," Adam said without preamble. "Shot at one of my men who was checking the north pasture. Missed, thankfully, but it was close." Florence's hand flew to her mouth. "My God, were you there?" Adam shook his head. "I was in the barn when it happened. By the time I got there, Walker had disappeared into the hills. I've got men searching and I've alerted the sheriff, but I wanted to make sure you were safe." "I'm fine," Florence assured him, leading him to sit on the edge of the bed. "But what about tomorrow?" "The wedding goes ahead as planned," Adam interrupted firmly. "I'm not letting Walker steal this from us, Florence. The church will be full of people, the sheriff and his deputy will be there, and half my ranch hands will be armed and watching every entrance." Florence studied his face, the determined set of his jaw, the unwavering certainty in his eyes, and felt her own resolve strengthening. "You're right. We've both waited too long for this happiness to let fear take it from us." Adam pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "Tomorrow you become my wife, Florence Wilson. Whatever happens after that, we face it together." Morning dawned clear and bright, the August sun warming the air as Florence prepared for her wedding day. Mrs. Prentice and 2 other ladies from the Aid Society arrived to help her dress, their cheerful chatter a welcome distraction from the anxiety that still lingered. "You look absolutely beautiful, dear," Mrs. Prentice declared as she secured the last pin in Florence's upswept hair. "That blue is perfect with your coloring. Mr. Jenkins won't know what hit him." Florence managed a smile, turning to examine herself in the mirror. The dress was indeed beautiful, deep sapphire silk with delicate lace trim, fitted at the waist and flowing gracefully to the floor. Her honey blonde hair was arranged in an elegant style, adorned with small white flowers, and her mother's pearl earrings, the only family heirloom she possessed, completed the ensemble. "It's time," one of the ladies announced, glancing at the small clock on the bedside table. The carriage is waiting downstairs." Florence took a deep breath, collecting her small bouquet of white roses and blue delphiniums. This was her 6th wedding day, yet it felt entirely new, not just another attempt at finding security, but a true beginning with a man she loved deeply, and who loved her in return. The short journey to the church passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. As promised, Adam had stationed ranch hands at strategic points along the route, their presence both reassuring and a stark reminder of the threat that still loomed. At the church steps, Florence paused, gazing up at the simple white steeple against the clear Nevada sky. 5 times she had walked into different churches in different towns, each time with hope that quickly faded. Would this time truly be different? "Ready, Mrs. Wilson?" asked Hank, Adam's foreman, who had volunteered to escort her down the aisle in the absence of any family. Florence squared her shoulders. "Yes, I'm ready." The small church was filled with faces that had become familiar over her months in Belmont: shopkeepers, ranchers, miners, and their families. Some who had once whispered about her now smiled warmly as she passed. At the altar stood Adam, handsome in his new suit, his eyes finding hers immediately and lighting up with a joy that dispelled her last lingering doubts. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. They had written their own vows, and when it came time to speak them, Florence's voice was clear and unwavering. "Adam Jenkins, I come to you having known both love and loss. I offer you not an untouched heart, but one that has been broken and mended and is stronger for its scars. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to face whatever comes with courage and faith, and to love you completely for all the days we are granted together." Adam's eyes shone as he took her hands in his voice deep with emotion as he spoke his own vows. "Florence Wilson, I choose you knowing your past and believing in our future. I offer you not blind optimism, but a steadfast commitment to build a life worthy of the trust you place in me. I promise to be your partner in all things, your shelter in storms, your companion in joy, and to love you completely until my last breath. 6 times forever, Florence, and I mean it." The simple gold band he slipped onto her finger seemed to weigh nothing at all, yet Florence felt its significance like an anchor, grounding her to this moment, to this man, to the future they would create together. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." As Adam drew her into his arms, Florence felt the last of her fear melting away. Whatever came next, even if Harlan Walker was still out there somewhere, nursing his grudge, they would face it together. The kiss was both tender and possessive, a public declaration of a bond that had been forged through months of careful courtship and tested by near tragedy. When they turned to face their guests as Mr. and Mrs. Adam Jenkins, the applause that greeted them seemed to echo Florence's own joy. The celebration that followed at the hotel was everything Florence had hoped for, intimate yet festive, filled with good food, music, and genuine well-wishes from people who had come to accept her as part of their community. Adam remained vigilant, his eyes occasionally scanning the room and the street beyond, but he never let his concern overshadow the significance of the day. He danced with Florence, fed her bites of wedding cake, and accepted congratulations with the easy grace that had first drawn her to him. As the afternoon waned, Adam leaned close to whisper in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Jenkins, home." The word resonated in Florence's heart with a sweetness she had almost forgotten. "Yes," she replied simply, "I'm ready." Their departure from the hotel was met with cheers and a shower of flower petals. The wagon that would take them back to the Lucky Strike waited, decorated with ribbons and flowers, Adam's most trusted hands positioned as escorts. No sign of Walker, Hank reported quietly as he helped them into the wagon. "Maybe he's moved on." Adam nodded, though his expression remained cautious. "Maybe. Keep your eyes open anyway. I'm not taking any chances with my wife's safety." The journey to the ranch passed uneventfully, the golden late afternoon light casting long shadows across the land that was now as much Florence's as it was Adam's. As they approached the main house, Florence felt a surge of emotion at the sight of it no longer just Adam's home, but theirs together. Adam lifted her from the wagon with a flourish that made her laugh, then paused before carrying her across the threshold. "Welcome home, Florence Jenkins," he said softly, his eyes reflecting all the love she felt in her own heart. "Home," she repeated, the word no longer just a dream but a reality she could touch and see and feel. "It has a nice sound to it." Adam carried her into the house, setting her down gently in the entryway that had been transformed in her absence. Fresh flowers filled vases on every surface, and a trail of rose petals led up the stairs toward the master bedroom, their bedroom now. "The hands helped," Adam admitted when he saw her surprise. "Even Hank said a proper homecoming was important." Florence felt tears pricking at her eyes. "It's perfect." They spent the evening in a bubble of newlywed happiness, sharing a private dinner prepared by the ranch cook, and speaking of their future plans, improvements to the ranch house, expanding the herd, perhaps even children someday, a possibility Florence had long since stopped allowing herself to consider. As night fell, they retired to their bedroom, where Adam helped her out of the blue silk dress with reverent hands, his touch awakening desires she had buried beneath layers of caution and grief. Their lovemaking was tender yet passionate, a physical expression of the commitment they had made before family and friends. Afterward, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Florence's head resting on Adam's chest, she allowed herself to fully believe, for the first time, that this happiness might last, that the curse, if it had ever truly existed, had been broken by the love of a man who refused to be frightened away by her past. "What are you thinking?" Adam murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Florence smiled against his skin. "That I'm happy, truly, completely happy." "Good," Adam replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "That's all I want for you, Florence, for us." They drifted to sleep in each other's arms, the concerns of the previous days temporarily forgotten in the cocoon of their new beginning. The sound of breaking glass shattered the peace of the night, instantly bringing both of them to full alertness. Adam was out of bed in a flash, reaching for his gun on the bedside table. "Stay here," he ordered in a whisper, pulling on his trousers. "Lock the door behind me." Florence's heart raced as she watched him slip from the room, the memory of 5 husbands lost surging back with terrible clarity. "Not again," she thought desperately. "Please, not again." Ignoring Adam's instructions, she pulled on her robe and followed him to the top of the stairs, where she could see the main floor of the house dimly illuminated by the light of a single lamp that had been left burning. Adam moved cautiously down the stairs, his gun held ready. From her position, Florence could see a broken window in the parlor, glass glittering on the floor in the lamplight. "Jenkins," a harsh voice called from outside. "Come out and face me, or I'll burn this pretty ranch of yours to the ground." Harlan Walker. Florence's blood ran cold as she realized the outlaw had finally made his move, choosing their wedding night for his revenge. Adam hesitated at the bottom of the stairs, clearly torn between confronting Walker and ensuring Florence's safety. "I know you're in there, Jenkins." Walker shouted again. "And I know about your new wife too, the Black Widow they call her. How about I save her the trouble of burying you?" Adam's expression hardened at the threat. He moved toward the front door, his intention clear. "Adam, no." Florence cried, unable to contain her fear any longer. He looked up, his face a mixture of anger and concern when he saw her on the stairs. "Florence, get back to the bedroom. Now." But Florence was already descending, her mind racing. She had lost 5 husbands to tragedy and misfortune. She would not lose a 6th to a vengeful outlaw, not without fighting for the happiness they had only just begun to build. "We face this together," she insisted, reaching the bottom of the stairs. "You promised. Whatever comes, we face it together." Before Adam could argue, a flaming torch sailed through the broken window, landing on the parlor rug and immediately setting it ablaze. "Out the back," Adam decided, grabbing Florence's arm and pulling her toward the kitchen. "The hands will have heard the commotion. We need to get clear of the house." They hurried through the darkened kitchen and out the back door into the yard behind the house. The night air was cool against Florence's skin, a stark contrast to the heat of the growing fire within. Shouts came from the direction of the bunkhouse as the ranch hands responded to the danger. But before Adam and Florence could reach them, a figure stepped from the shadows of the barn, a gun leveled at Adam's chest. "End of the line, Jenkins," Harlan Walker growled, his face twisted with malice in the light of the burning house. "Been waiting 10 years for this moment." Adam pushed Florence behind him, his own gun still held ready. "It's over, Walker. The sheriff knows you're in the area. My men are armed and coming this way. You'll never get off this property alive if you pull that trigger." Walker sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Maybe not, but I'll die knowing I took you with me." Everything seemed to slow down for Florence in that moment, the crackling of the fire consuming their home, the approaching shouts of the ranch hands, the deadly standoff playing out before her eyes. 5 times she had been powerless to prevent tragedy, but not this time, not with Adam. With a desperate cry, she launched herself at Walker, catching him off guard and throwing off his aim as he fired. The bullet went wide, missing Adam by inches. The momentum of Florence's attack knocked Walker off balance, sending both of them tumbling to the ground. Walker recovered quickly, his face contorted with rage as he raised his gun again, but this time toward Florence. 2 shots rang out almost simultaneously. Walker jerked backward, surprise replacing the rage on his face as he crumpled to the ground. Adam stood with his smoking gun still aimed, his expression a mixture of fury and terror. "Florence," he cried, rushing to where she lay motionless beside Walker's body. "Florence, answer me." She blinked up at him, the wind knocked out of her from the fall but otherwise unharmed. Walker's bullet had missed her as well, embedding itself in the ground inches from her head. "I'm all right," she gasped as Adam gathered her into his arms, his hands frantically checking for injuries. "I'm not hurt." The ranch hands arrived, taking in the scene with wide eyes, the burning house, Walker's lifeless body, and their boss cradling his new wife in the dirt yard. "Get water on that fire," Adam ordered, not taking his eyes from Florence's face. "And someone ride for the sheriff." As the men scrambled to obey, Adam helped Florence to her feet, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Don't ever do that again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I thought I'd lost you." Florence clung to him, her whole body trembling with the aftermath of terror and relief. "I couldn't let him take you from me. I've lost too much already." Adam pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her face. "We're both still here. That's what matters." By dawn, the fire had been extinguished, though the main house had sustained significant damage. The sheriff had come and gone, taking Walker's body and recording their statements about the night's events. It was ruled a clear case of self-defense. Walker had not only threatened them and set fire to their home, but had fired the first shot. Florence and Adam sat on the porch of the foreman's cabin, where Hank had insisted they stay until the main house could be repaired. Despite the exhaustion etched on both their faces, there was a sense of peace between them that had been hard-won. "Some wedding night," Adam remarked, his arm around Florence's shoulders as they watched the sun rise over the mountains. "Not exactly what I had planned for you." Florence leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. "We're alive, together." "That's more than I dared hope for when I heard that first shot." Adam's arm tightened around her. "You saved my life, Florence, running at Walker like that. It was the bravest and most foolish thing I've ever seen." "I couldn't stand by and watch another husband die," she said simply. "Not when I could do something about it." Adam turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "Is that what you were afraid of? That I'd end up like the others?" Florence nodded, tears filling her eyes. "5 times, Adam. 5 times I've watched men I cared for slip away. Each time there was nothing I could do but grieve and move on. With you, it's different. What I feel for you is different. I couldn't bear to lose you too." Adam brushed a tear from her cheek, his expression tender. "So you decided to break the pattern by taking on an armed outlaw barehanded." A watery laugh escaped her. "It wasn't my most logical moment." "No," Adam agreed, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "But it was the moment I knew beyond any doubt that this marriage is different from your others, that we're going to beat whatever odds or curses or bad luck has followed you. Because we're fighting for this together, Florence. 6th time is forever, and I meant every word." As the sun climbed higher, painting the damaged house and smoke-stained barn in golden light, Florence looked out over the ranch that was now her home. There would be rebuilding to do, both of structures and of confidence. The specter of her past would not disappear overnight. But for the first time, she truly believed in the possibility of a future untainted by tragedy. "Forever," she repeated, leaning in to kiss her husband as a new day, the first of their life together, truly began. Epilogue: 5 years later, the winter of 1881 had been unusually mild in Nevada, allowing for an early spring that turned the hills around the Lucky Strike ranch a vibrant green. Florence Jenkins stood on the wide porch of the rebuilt main house, watching a small figure on a pony trotting carefully around the corral under Adam's watchful guidance. "Keep your heels down, William." Adam called to their 4-year-old son, whose face was a study in concentration as he followed his father's instructions. "That's it, boy. You're a natural." Florence smiled, one hand resting on the gentle swell of her abdomen where their second child, a daughter, she was certain had just begun to make her presence known. The years since their dramatic wedding night had been good ones, filled with the steady work of building a life together, and the unexpected joy of parenthood when William had arrived the year after they wed. The rebuilt house was larger than the original, with a nursery that would soon accommodate 2 children, and a library filled with books that Florence had ordered from as far away as San Francisco and New York. The Lucky Strike had prospered under their joint management, with Florence's head for business complementing Adam's practical knowledge of ranching. They had faced challenges, of course a drought that threatened the herd, a brief illness that had kept Adam bedridden for weeks, the normal tensions that arose between 2 strong-willed people building a life together. But through it all, the foundation of their partnership had remained solid, their love deepening with each obstacle overcome. "Mama, look," William called out, his face split by a wide grin that revealed a recently lost tooth. "I'm riding by myself. I see you, darling." Florence called back, waving. "You're doing wonderfully." Adam glanced up at her, his face weathered by the years but still handsome, his smile as warm as it had been the day they met. The streaks of silver at his temples only added to his appeal in Florence's opinion. He said something to William, then handed the lead rope to one of the young ranch hands who had been helping with the lesson before striding toward the house. "How are my girls doing?" he asked as he climbed the porch steps, his hand automatically reaching for the slight curve of her stomach. "We're just fine," Florence replied, leaning into his embrace. "Though your daughter seems to be practicing her roping skills on my insides." Adam chuckled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Another spirited Jenkins, then. God help us all." They stood together watching their son, who was now proudly showing off his riding skills to the admiring ranch hands. The boy had Adam's dark hair and tall build, but Florence's green eyes and determined chin. A perfect blend of them both. 5 years, Adam mused, his arm secure around her waist. "Did you ever think we'd get here that first day in Hobson's store?" Florence shook her head, remembering the wary widow she had been, determined to avoid entanglements and protect her heart at all costs. "I was too busy trying not to notice how handsome you were," she admitted, "and telling myself all the reasons why I should stay away from you. And yet here we are," Adam said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Mrs. Jenkins, mother of my children, partner in all things, and the love of my life." "Here we are," Florence agreed softly. "Against all odds and curses and my own fears." Adam turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "No more talk of curses. We've made our own luck, Florence, good and bad, and we'll keep making it together for many years to come." As the setting sun bathed the lucky strike in golden light, Florence Jenkins, once the Black Widow of the West, now beloved wife, mother, and respected rancher's partner, stood in the circle of her husband's arms and knew with absolute certainty that Adam had been right all along. Sixth time was indeed forever, and she wouldn't have it any other way.